The church bells rang that Saturday morning, echoing across the small town of Ejan. The air was thick with celebration, children ran around barefoot, women in bright wrappers laughed as they adjusted their head ties, and the aroma of jollof rice and fried meat filled the air. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Grace's life. Welcome to Sarah Wood's Tale. Where stories comes alive, please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on your notification bell for subsequent stories. She stood at the church entrance, her white gown simple yet elegant, her heart beating faster than the church drums. Her palms were damp with nervous sweat as she adjusted the small veil over her face. Grace wasn't from a rich family. Her mother sold roasted plantain by the roadside, and her father had died when she was 12. She had grown up hearing that good men don't marry girls like her. But Daniel, tall, educated, handsome Daniel, had looked beyond her humble background. Or so she thought. She smiled shyly as she walked down the aisle, clutching her small bouquet of lilies. Her heart whispered silent prayers. God, let today be the beginning of joy. Please, make his mother love me. Please. Daniel stood at the altar, smiling proudly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety. His mother, Madame Victoria, sat in the front row, her face carved like stone, her arms crossed as if the whole ceremony disgusted her. Everyone knew Madame Victoria, the woman who ran her late husband's business with an iron fist. She was respected, feared, and known for her sharp tongue. People said she could break a person's spirit with just a glance. And right now, all her glares were reserved for Grace. When the priest finally pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted with cheers. Grace's eyes filled with tears as Daniel lifted her veil and kissed her. She felt warmth flood her heart. She had dreamed of this moment since the day Daniel proposed under the mango tree behind her mother's house. But behind that smile, Madame Victoria's jaw tightened. She leaned closer to her friend beside her and hissed, "This marriage won't last. That girl will ruin my son's life." The reception was held in Madame Victoria's compound, a large house surrounded by high walls and freshly painted gates. Grace's family sat quietly in one corner, feeling out of place among the wealthy guests in lace and gold. Madame Victoria barely looked at them. When Grace's mother tried to greet her, Victoria only nodded coldly and turned away. Later that afternoon, as the couple prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Madame Victoria called her son aside. Her smile was thin, her voice low but sharp. "Daniel," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "I have only one son. You know how much I've sacrificed for you." Daniel nodded cautiously. "I know, Mother." She glanced toward Grace, who was laughing shyly with one of her bridesmaids. "You've tied yourself to misery, my son. That girl will bring you nothing but shame. Mark my words." Daniel's brows furrowed. "Mother, please don't say that today. It's my wedding day." "Exactly," she snapped. "Your wedding day, and you chose a girl who can barely speak good English. What will society say? Do you think money and class mean nothing? Love cannot feed you, Daniel." Daniel sighed deeply, lowering his eyes. "Grace is kind. She loves me." Madame Victoria's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Kindness doesn't cook soup, my son. She will drain you dry. But don't worry," she added coldly, "when she starts to show her true color, I'll be here waiting." She walked away before he could reply, her wrapper sweeping the ground like a queen's robe. Grace noticed Daniel's distant look when he returned. "Are you okay?" she asked softly as they entered the car that would take them to their honeymoon. He forced a smile. "I'm fine, love. Just tired." But even as he spoke, his mother's words echoed in his head. "You've tied yourself to misery." That night, in their small hotel room, Grace sat by the window, staring at the moonlight through the thin curtains. Daniel was asleep, his breathing soft and even. She smiled faintly and whispered, "I'll make him proud. I'll make her love me." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't understand, the kind that came when joy and fear meet in the heart. She didn't know it yet, but that prayer was the first of many nights she would cry alone, asking heaven to help her survive in a home that would soon feel like a cage. The next morning, the couple returned to Madame Victoria's house for the traditional family blessing. The atmosphere was heavy, the joy of yesterday gone like smoke. Victoria sat on her favorite chair, dressed in her royal blue lace. Her face was expressionless as she looked at the newlyweds. "Welcome back," she said curtly. "I hope your one-night honeymoon was enjoyable." Grace smiled nervously. "Yes, Ma. It was lovely." Victoria's eyes swept over her daughter-in-law, from her cheap gown to her simple sandals. She shook her head slowly. "Grace," she said, her tone sugar-coated but sharp, "I know you are from a humble background. But in this house, we have standards. I expect you to learn them quickly." Grace nodded respectfully. "Yes, Ma. I'll do my best." Victoria leaned back. "Your best. I hope your best will not bring shame to my family. I don't want gossip about how my son's wife can't cook or how she greets people without kneeling properly. Do you understand me?" Grace's heart thudded. "Yes, Ma. I understand." Daniel shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. When Victoria dismissed them, Grace tried to hold Daniel's hand as they walked upstairs, but he gently pulled away. "Don't mind her," he said quietly. "She'll come around." Grace forced a smile. "I hope so." But deep down, she already felt the chill in her bones. Something about that house didn't feel like home. That night, as Grace unpacked her bags, she looked at her wedding dress hanging in the corner. She touched it gently, tears pooling in her eyes. "Just be patient," she whispered to herself. "Everything will be fine." But outside her door, Madame Victoria stood listening, her lips pressed into a thin, cruel line. "We shall see, Grace," she muttered under her breath. "We shall see." The lights in the compound flickered as thunder rolled across the sky, a storm brewing, just like the one that was about to break inside that home. The morning sun crept gently through the curtains, casting a golden glow across the bedroom. Grace stirred quietly, her heart swelling with new dreams of married life. She turned to look at Daniel beside her, peaceful, handsome, the man she prayed for every night before they met. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Good morning, my husband." He groaned softly, half asleep. Morning, Grace." Her chest warmed. "My husband." The word tasted sweet on her tongue. She stood, wrapped her scarf around her hair, and tiptoed toward the door. She wanted to surprise him, make his breakfast before he woke. But as she stepped into the hallway, her joy shattered. Madame Victoria was already in the living room, seated with her morning tea and newspaper. She glanced up sharply, her eyes narrowing. "Good morning, Ma," Grace said quickly, kneeling respectfully. Victoria's gaze swept over her like she was dirt on the floor. "Morning," she muttered without warmth. "You're up early." "Why?" Grace smiled nervously. "I wanted to make breakfast for everyone." Victoria folded her newspaper slowly. "You make breakfast? For who?" For Daniel." "And you, Ma," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. Victoria chuckled, a cold, dry laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Listen, young woman. I don't eat food prepared by strangers. My stomach is not a dumping ground. You can cook for yourself and your husband, but leave my kitchen alone." Grace's heart sank. "I understand, Ma." "Good," Victoria said, sipping her tea. "And please, don't roam around my house like a maid looking for what to touch. Stay in your room when you have nothing to do." Grace nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes, Ma." As she turned to leave, Victoria's voice followed her. "And tell that lazy son of mine to wake up. This is not a hotel." Back in the room, Grace sat quietly at the edge of the bed. Her chest ached, but she forced a smile as Daniel yawned awake. "Morning, love," he said sleepily. "You're up already?" "Yes," she replied softly. "Your mum said I shouldn't cook for her. She said she doesn't eat food made by strangers." Daniel rubbed his eyes, sighing. "Ignore her, Grace. That's just how she is. She'll come around with time." Grace wanted to believe him. She truly did. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but Victoria never came around. Instead, her hostility grew like poison ivy, spreading into every corner of the house. Every morning, Grace woke before sunrise to sweep, mop, and wash the dishes, not because she was asked, but because she wanted to please her mother-in-law. Yet every effort ended in insult. One morning, while Grace was scrubbing the veranda, Victoria came out holding her phone. "What is this?" she snapped, pointing at a small stain Grace had missed. Is this how they clean in your father's compound? You want to disgrace me with your dirty upbringing? Grace dropped the mop immediately. I'm sorry, Ma. I'll clean it again. Victoria scoffed. I knew it. You married my son to enjoy a soft life, not to serve. Lazy girl. Grace's hands trembled. No, Ma. Shut up. Victoria barked. You talk too much. You should be thankful I even let you stay under my roof. My late husband's spirit must be weeping to see me live with a woman like you. Daniel, who had just stepped out of the room, froze at the sound of his mother's voice. Grace turned to him desperately. Daniel, I didn't do anything. Victoria interrupted sharply. Don't defend her, my son. You've gone blind because of her fake tears. Look at her, a village girl pretending to be a wife. Daniel rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. Mother, please. It's too early for shouting. Victoria folded her arms. Too early? If you don't like it, you can move out with her, but remember, you'll never get a kobo from me again. Daniel's jaw tightened. He said nothing. He just turned and went back into the room. Grace stood frozen, her eyes filling with silent tears. Later that afternoon, Grace sat alone in the small backyard. She wiped her tears with the edge of her wrapper, whispering prayers under her breath. God, please help me. I don't know what to do anymore. I just want peace. She looked up at the sky, her vision blurry from tears. Maybe she's right, she murmured. Maybe I don't belong here. She was still lost in thought when Daniel came out. He sat beside her quietly, his expression heavy. Grace, he said softly, I know my mother can be difficult. But she's the only parent I have left. Please, just try to be patient with her. Grace nodded weakly. I'm trying, Daniel. I really am. But she hates me for no reason. Sometimes I wonder if I married you or her. Daniel sighed deeply. Don't say that. You married me. I love you. She looked into his eyes. Then protect me. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked away, defeated. Grace realized in that moment that she was on her own. The following week, Victoria hosted a small family gathering. Grace cooked for Daniel and herself in their small kitchen upstairs, but when she tried to join the guests in the living room, Victoria stopped her at the door. Where do you think you're going? Grace blinked. To greet the guests, Ma. Victoria's eyes darkened. Guests? My guests. Do you think they came to see you? Grace stammered. No, Ma. I just wanted to greet them. Go back to your room, Victoria ordered coldly. You don't belong in this gathering. We are discussing family matters, not for outsiders. The words hit Grace like a slap. Outsider. That's what she was in her own home. Later that night, Daniel found her crying quietly beside the window. Grace, he said softly, you didn't come down for dinner. I saved some food for you. She shook her head. I'm not hungry. He sighed. You can't keep starving yourself. My mother will change one day. Grace looked at him through her tears. When, Daniel? When I'm gone? When she drives me away? Daniel frowned. You're talking as if I don't care. Grace bit her lip. Sometimes, I feel like you don't. The silence between them was heavy. Daniel reached out to touch her, but she gently pulled away. Days later, a small misunderstanding turned into a storm. Grace had accidentally broken one of Victoria's favorite plates, a fine china dish her late husband had bought years ago. When Victoria found out, she screamed so loudly the neighbors came out to look. You useless woman. Do you know how much that plate costs? You're here to destroy everything I've worked for. Grace knelt immediately, shaking. I'm sorry, Ma. It slipped from my hand. I didn't mean. You didn't mean. You never mean. Maybe it's your village gods that sent you here to torment me. Daniel rushed in when he heard the shouting. Mother, please, it's just a plate. Victoria's eyes blazed. Just a plate. You see how she has bewitched you? You're defending her over me. Daniel clenched his jaw. I'm not defending anyone. I'm only saying this shouting isn't necessary. Victoria glared at him, then pointed at Grace. One day, She will cost you everything, Daniel. You'll remember my words. She turned and stormed off, muttering curses under her breath. Grace sat on the floor, shaking, her tears dropping onto the broken pieces of china. Daniel bent down to help her pick them up. "I'm sorry, Grace," he whispered. But Grace said nothing. Her heart felt numb. Weeks later, things grew worse. Victoria started locking her food in her room, claiming Grace was wasting provisions. She complained about the way Grace washed her clothes, the way she laughed, even the way she breathed. One evening, Grace overheard Victoria speaking to a neighbor. "That girl has no shame. She trapped my son with her fake humility. If I had my way, I'd send her back to her mother tomorrow." Grace's chest tightened. She went into her room, shut the door, and cried until her body ached. When Daniel came home that night, she tried to tell him what she'd heard, but he brushed it off. "Grace, please. Don't start again. My mother talks too much, ignore her." She swallowed her pain. "You say that like it's easy." He hugged her half-heartedly. "Just be strong for me, okay? I'll find us a place soon. Somewhere we can have peace." Grace nodded, though she didn't believe it. She had heard that promise too many times. The next morning, Grace woke up feeling dizzy. She hadn't eaten well in days. As she bent to sweep the floor, she suddenly felt her stomach twist painfully. The broom fell from her hand as she gasped, grabbing her belly. Victoria, hearing the sound, came rushing in, not out of concern, but annoyance. "What is it this time?" she barked. Grace winced, trying to steady herself. I think I'm not feeling well." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Maybe you're pretending again so my son will pity you. Stand up and clean that floor." Grace struggled to her feet, her vision blurry. She tried to explain, but before she could finish, she collapsed. Victoria jumped back, startled. "Ah, Grace, Grace." Her cries brought Daniel running. He lifted Grace into his arms, shouting for the driver to start the car. As they drove off to the hospital, Victoria stood at the gate, her hand on her chest, her face unreadable. "She better not be pregnant," she muttered under her breath. "Because if she is, I will never accept that child." The rain began to fall again that evening, light and cold, a warning from the heavens. Grace's trials were only beginning. 2 long years passed after that day Grace fainted in the living room. 2 years of silent tears. 2 years of humiliation. 2 years of waiting. Grace had become the shadow of her old self. Her laughter, once full of warmth, had turned into something faint and distant. She tried everything to please Madame Victoria, cooked her favorite meals, washed her clothes, even ironed her wrappers with care. But no matter what she did, Victoria found fault. "You've eaten all the eggs in this house," the older woman would shout. "And yet you can't produce one of your own." Grace would bow her head, her heart trembling. She had prayed every night on her knees, whispering, "God, if you remember me, I will never stop thanking you." Daniel had become quieter too. The love that once burned brightly between them had faded into something uncertain, cold, strained, full of unspoken words. When Grace tried to talk about seeing a doctor, he'd shrug. "There's no need for that," he'd say. "Maybe it's just not our time." But every time she saw the disappointment in his eyes, she knew he blamed her, even if he never said it aloud. One evening, after another argument with Victoria about barrenness, Grace sat in the backyard, crying silently. The moonlight fell softly across her face as she whispered, "Lord, are you still there? Did I offend you?" The sound of her own sobbing was her only answer until she heard Daniel's footsteps behind her. "Grace," he said quietly, "come inside. It's cold." She wiped her tears quickly. "I'm fine." He sighed and sat beside her. "I know it's not easy. But let's keep believing, okay?" Grace nodded slowly. "I'll keep believing." And she did. 3 months later, something strange began to happen. Grace would wake up feeling dizzy. The smell of fried fish made her stomach turn. Her body felt heavy, and her appetite changed. At first, she ignored it, afraid to hope. But when her monthly flow didn't come, her heart began to race. One bright morning, she went to the local clinic quietly. The nurse ran a test and smiled. "Congratulations, Ma. You're pregnant. Grace froze. What did you say? You're expecting, the nurse repeated gently. Almost 2 months gone. Grace covered her mouth, tears flooding her eyes. She couldn't stop shaking. Thank you, Lord, she whispered. You heard me. You finally heard me. She walked home with trembling hands, clutching her small test result like gold. When she reached the compound, she ran straight into Daniel's arms. Daniel. Daniel. It happened. I'm pregnant. For a moment, he just stared at her, his face unreadable. Then slowly, a smile broke across his lips. He lifted her into the air, laughing. You're serious? Grace, are you sure? She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I went to the clinic. It's true. He hugged her tightly, his heart beating fast against hers. Oh God, Grace. I can't believe it. You've made me the happiest man alive. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. Grace danced around the room, humming softly, touching her belly. But joy in that house never lasted long. That evening, when Daniel told his mother, Madame Victoria's face hardened. What nonsense are you saying? She snapped. Pregnant? How? Daniel frowned. Mother, what kind of question is that? Grace is my wife. Victoria crossed her arms, her eyes blazing. After 3 years of emptiness, she suddenly has a child. Who's the father, Daniel? Daniel's jaw dropped. Mother. Grace, who had just entered the room, stopped dead. Her heart pounded. Victoria turned to her slowly. Tell me the truth, Grace. Who did you sleep with? Which man gave you this baby? Grace's mouth fell open. Ma, how can you say that? I would never. Liar. Victoria shouted. You barren tree suddenly bears fruit. Whose seed is it really? You think you can fool me? Grace fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Ma, please. I swear with my life, the baby is Daniel's. I've never known any other man, but Victoria's words were like poison. Don't swear. God does not listen to liars. You came here to destroy my family. Daniel stood still, silent, frozen. Grace looked up at him, her voice breaking. Daniel, say something. Please. Tell her it's your child. He swallowed hard. Mother, that's enough. That's not a yes, Victoria cut in sharply. Even you, Daniel, know deep down what she's capable of. Mother, stop, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Grace stared at him, her heart shattering. His silence hurt more than Victoria's insults. She covered her face, crying uncontrollably. Victoria hissed and stormed out of the room, leaving the air heavy with pain. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling her baby move slightly inside her, a small flutter that reminded her she wasn't completely alone. You're innocent, she whispered to her belly. Don't worry, my little one. Mummy will protect you. No matter what. Months passed. Grace's belly grew, and so did Victoria's hatred. She called Grace names, refused to let her rest, and even spread rumors in church that her son's wife was carrying another man's child. Grace bore it all silently. Every insult. Every accusation. Every cold look. She would kneel by her bed each night and whisper, God, give me strength until this child comes safely. Even Daniel began staying out late, coming home with excuses about work. Grace missed his laughter, his warmth, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. She missed her husband. But despite it all, she held on to hope. Because hope was all she had left. The sky was grey that morning. The air felt heavy, like rain was waiting for something tragic before it fell. Grace woke up early, her heart pounding. She felt sharp pain shoot through her belly, pain unlike anything she'd felt before. She cried out, gripping the bedpost. Oh God, it's time. The house was silent. Daniel had traveled 2 days earlier for business in Abuja. Only Madame Victoria and the maid were around. The maid ran into the room, panic in her voice. Madam Grace, you're in labor. Grace nodded weakly. Please, call Mama. The maid ran downstairs. Moments later, Victoria appeared at the door, her arms folded. So it's happening, she said coldly. Grace nodded, sweating, her voice trembling. "Please, help me. I need to get to the hospital." Victoria looked at her for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Fine. Let's go. But don't think giving birth will change anything between us." Hours later, after a painful delivery, the cries of a newborn baby filled the hospital room. A nurse smiled, wrapping the small boy in a soft blanket. "Congratulations, Ma. You have a healthy baby boy." Grace lay on the bed, tears rolling down her cheeks. She stretched out her trembling arms. "Let me hold him." When they placed the baby in her hands, she felt a warmth so deep it took her breath away. The tiny fingers, the soft cry, the heartbeat, it was all real. "My son," she whispered. "My miracle." For the first time in years, Grace smiled a genuine smile. When Victoria arrived at the hospital later that day, she didn't even look at the baby. "So," she said, her voice dripping with contempt, "this is the child?" Grace nodded, smiling weakly. "Yes, Ma. Isn't he beautiful?" Victoria scoffed. "Beautiful? I see nothing but trouble. A bastard born to steal my son's fortune." Grace gasped. "Mama, don't call him that. Please." Victoria's expression didn't change. "You think one child will make me forget the shame you brought into my home? Never. Don't celebrate too soon." She turned and walked out, leaving Grace trembling with tears. That night, the rain began to fall, heavy, angry, unending. Thunder roared across the sky. Grace held her baby close, whispering softly to him. "Don't cry, my love. Mummy's here. Mummy will protect you." She didn't know that while she slept, exhausted from labor, something terrible was brewing in that house. Victoria had gone home earlier that evening, pacing her room restlessly. The sound of rain against the window made her uneasy. In her heart, a dark jealousy burned, one she couldn't explain. "That child will take my son away from me," she muttered. "He already has." She sat there for hours, the storm outside echoing the storm in her mind. "That woman has tied my son to shame," she muttered. "Now she's given birth to a child who will take everything from him." Her eyes glowed with jealousy. Her mind whispered wicked ideas. And before dawn broke, she made a terrible decision. She took her shawl, covered her head, and walked into the storm. The hospital gates were quiet when she arrived. She bribed a sleepy security guard with a bundle of cash and walked straight into Grace's ward. Grace was fast asleep, breathing softly. The baby was wrapped in a warm blanket beside her. Victoria stared at the tiny child. His little fingers moved, his lips puckered in his dreams. But there was no softness in her eyes. Only hatred. "You came to steal my son's love," she whispered coldly. "But you won't succeed." She looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then, with trembling hands, she lifted the baby from the crib. The child stirred, letting out a small cry. Victoria pressed the blanket closer, silencing him. "Shush. It's all right, little one. You won't feel a thing." She walked quickly through the corridor and out into the stormy night. Outside, the wind howled and rain poured like waterfalls. Victoria clutched the baby tightly as she walked down the muddy road. Her heart beat fast, but she didn't stop until she reached the edge of the street near a closed gate. She looked at the helpless child in her arms. His face glowed faintly beneath the blanket. He moved slightly, searching for warmth. "You don't belong to us," Victoria hissed. "Your kind brings nothing but sorrow." And with one cruel motion, she laid him down by the gate in the cold rain and turned her back. The baby began to cry. Soft at first. Then louder. Louder. But Victoria didn't look back. She walked away into the darkness, her shawl soaked, her heart stone cold. Minutes passed. The rain beat harder. Thunder rolled. Then headlights appeared, a car stopped by the roadside. A woman stepped out, holding an umbrella. She was in her mid-40s, dressed modestly but with grace. Her name was Mrs. Benson, a widow returning home from a late-night church program. She froze when she heard the faint cry. "What's that?" she whispered, straining her ears. The cry came again, desperate, heart-wrenching. She followed the sound to the gate and gasped when she saw the tiny bundle shivering in the rain. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, dropping to her knees. "A baby." She scooped him up quickly, wrapping him in her shawl. "Oh, you poor thing. Who could leave you like this?" The baby whimpered softly, as though answering her. Mrs. Benson's heart broke. She looked around, but the street was empty. No one in sight. "Don't worry," she said gently, kissing his forehead. "You're safe now. You'll never be alone again." She took the baby into her car and drove home through the storm, whispering prayers under her breath. "Lord, if you sent him to me, then I will raise him like my own." And just like that, a stranger's kindness saved Grace's son from death. The next morning, Victoria returned home drenched but calm. She hid her wet shawl and wiped her face before Daniel arrived. When he walked in, he looked worried. "Mother, what happened? Why are you up so early?" Victoria forced tears into her eyes. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling. "There's something terrible I must tell you." He frowned. "What is it?" She placed a hand dramatically on her chest. "It's about the baby." Daniel's heart skipped. "What about him?" Victoria sighed, lowering her gaze. "He didn't make it." Daniel froze. "What?" "The nurse called," she said, pretending to wipe tears. "He died in his sleep last night. I went there this morning. They've already taken care of everything." Daniel staggered back. No, that can't be. I just spoke to Grace last night. She's resting," Victoria said quickly. The shock was too much. "Please, son, don't blame her. These things happen." He sat down slowly, numb, broken. "My son." Victoria placed a hand on his shoulder. "You still have me, Daniel. You still have me." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Grace woke up with a smile. Her first thought was of her baby. "Good morning, my love," she whispered, turning to the crib. But the crib was empty. Her smile faded. "Nurse," she called weakly. "Where's my baby?" The nurse rushed in, her face pale. "Madam Grace, please sit down." Grace's chest tightened. "Where's my baby?" The nurse hesitated. "The baby, he didn't make it through the night." Grace's world shattered in an instant. "No," she screamed, trying to get off the bed. "That's not true. I held him. He was fine. Bring me my baby." The nurse held her gently. "I'm so sorry." Grace's knees gave way. She fell to the floor, crying so hard the sound tore through the ward. "God, why? Why would you take him from me?" Her cries echoed down the hall. Even the nurses wept quietly. 3 days later, Grace was discharged empty-handed, heartbroken, and weak. Daniel came to pick her up, his face stiff with guilt. In the car, she looked at him, her eyes swollen from crying. "You didn't even go to the hospital, Daniel. You didn't see him one last time." He looked away. "Mother said they buried him quickly. There was nothing left to do." Grace's lips trembled. "Our child, Daniel. Our only child." He clenched the steering wheel, tears forming in his eyes. "Please, Grace. I can't talk about it." And that silence between them grew heavy, cold, full of ghosts. That night, while Grace sat in the room holding the baby blanket, she whispered, "My son, wherever you are, know that I love you. Even if I never see you again, I will love you until my last breath." Outside, the rain began to fall again, gentle this time, like heaven weeping softly for her. Weeks passed, but the pain didn't fade. Grace barely ate, barely spoke. She spent hours staring at the empty crib. Daniel tried to comfort her, but his words felt hollow. And Victoria's cruelty only grew stronger. "A woman who kills her own child with bad luck," she hissed one morning. "That's what you are." Grace looked at her with weak eyes. "Please stop, Mama. Haven't I suffered enough?" Victoria sneered. "Suffered enough? You've brought nothing but pain into this family. My son has changed because of you." Daniel walked in just as his mother said that. He rubbed his temples. "Mother, please." "No, Daniel." Victoria snapped. "You can't defend her anymore. The gods have shown you what she truly is." Grace stood up slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't kill my baby. God knows I didn't." Victoria stepped closer, pointing at her. Then why did he die under your watch? You cursed woman. You brought shame to this family the day you walked into it. Daniel said nothing. He looked at Grace, torn, and that silence broke her heart again. Daniel, she whispered, voice trembling, do you believe her? Do you think I killed our child? He looked away, his lips tight. Grace, please don't make this harder. Grace's knees gave way. Oh God. Victoria smirked, satisfied. Enough crying. Pack your things. You're leaving my house today. Grace froze. What? You heard me, Victoria said sharply. Out. You won't bring more curses into my home. Grace turned to Daniel in disbelief. Daniel, you're not going to let her do this, right? He swallowed hard. Grace, maybe it's best if you go away for a while. Just to heal. Her mouth fell open. A while? Where will I go? I have nothing left. He couldn't look her in the eyes. Mother's right, we both need space. Grace let out a bitter laugh through her tears. Space? After everything we've been through? After losing our child? Victoria's voice cut through the air. Pack your things before I throw them out myself. Within minutes, Grace found herself thrown out of the house barefoot, in a torn wrapper, her few belongings stuffed in a nylon bag. The gate closed behind her with a loud slam that echoed in her soul. She stood there in the cold evening air, her heart shattered, rain starting to fall again as if the heavens mourned with her. She looked back at the house, whispering through her tears. You'll regret this. Not because I will fight you, but because one day, my tears will speak louder than your lies. And with that, she turned and walked away into the darkness, into the unknown, with nothing but faith to guide her. She wandered the streets until dawn, her feet swollen, her body trembling. She slept under a shed that night, hugging herself for warmth. As the first light of morning touched her face, she whispered one last prayer. God, if you're still with me, don't let my suffering be in vain. Let my pain birth a new beginning. And somewhere, far away, in a small warm house, a baby boy, her baby, opened his eyes and smiled at the woman who had rescued him. Mrs. Benson looked down at him lovingly. You'll be called David, she said softly, because you'll rise from nothing and conquer everything. The years rolled by like pages in a painful book. The world had moved on, but Grace's heart still carried scars that time could not erase. She had cried, begged, and almost given up on life, but somehow, she found strength in the same faith that once seemed silent. After wandering the streets for days, hungry and weak, she found refuge in a small church. The women there helped her, gave her food, and let her sleep in the church kitchen. Slowly, Grace began to rebuild her life, one day at a time. At first, she washed plates for a roadside food vendor. Then she started helping to cook. Her meals were so delicious that customers began asking for the food cooked by that calm woman with the sad eyes. It wasn't long before Grace gathered the courage to start her own small food business. She rented a tiny kiosk by the roadside, made jollof rice, moi moi, and stew, and named it Hope Kitchen. Every day she would whisper a prayer before opening. God, let my hands bring peace, not pain. Meanwhile, miles away, Mrs. Benson's home was filled with laughter and joy. The little baby she had found in the rain had grown into a bright, curious boy. She named him Ethan Benson, but she always knew deep down that he was special, a child sent to her by destiny. Ethan grew up gentle and kind, with eyes full of wonder. He loved fixing things, taking apart broken radios, and asking endless questions. Mom, he'd say, why do people cry when they're happy? Mrs. Benson would smile. Because sometimes, joy overflows so much it turns into tears. Like when it rains too much, he'd ask, tilting his head. Yes, my son, she'd laugh softly. Just like that. She raised him with love, faith, and discipline. Though she wasn't rich, her home was filled with warmth. Ethan never knew the story of how he came to her, not yet. Back in the city, Grace's small business began to grow. People loved her food, not just for the taste, but for the peace she carried in her spirit. One day, a woman named Mrs. Adeyemi, a popular event planner, stopped by her kiosk. Who cooked this jollof? She asked, licking her fingers. Grace smiled shyly. I did, Ma. The woman's eyes widened. You're wasted here. You should be cooking for weddings. Grace laughed softly. I'm not sure I can handle big events, Ma. Mrs. Adeyemi smiled. Leave that to me. You'll get your chance. True to her word, she connected Grace to new clients. Within 2 years, Grace's small kiosk had turned into a proper catering company, Graceful Bites. She trained young girls, gave jobs to widows, and sponsored a few orphans back to school. She had rebuilt her life from ashes. One evening, as Grace was closing her shop, she looked up at the sky. The sunset painted everything gold. She whispered softly, if my son were alive, he'd be about 9 now. Her heart squeezed painfully, but then she smiled. Wherever you are, my child, I hope you're happy.